Look at her, standing there in the rain with those babies. Useless, just like her mother before her. Those were the cruel words of her own relative, spoken as the orphan girl clutched her newborn twins to her chest, shivering beneath the storm. Hungry, weak, and abandoned, she was left to face not only the cold rain but the colder hearts of those who should have protected her. But fate has a way of turning cruelty into revelation. A billionaire heiress, shielded all her life from such pain, stopped to look closer. And what she discovered in that moment brought tears to her eyes and changed everything. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers but from family. And sometimes the encounter you never expect is the one that rewrites a life forever. This is the story of a young woman cast aside by her own blood, and the truth that shook even the wealthiest heart. And today it is being retold by me. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please, subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The rain poured as if the sky itself wanted to wash the city away. Grace stood at the corner of the street, her arms aching from the weight of the two tiny bundles pressed against her chest. Her newborn twins whimpered, their cries faint under the roar of thunder. Her thin sweater clung to her body, soaked through, useless against the cold. She whispered, rocking them gently, "Noah, Nathan, hold on. Mommy's here." Cars rushed by, spraying dirty water onto the sidewalk. People hurried past with umbrellas, pulling their coats tighter, glancing at her only long enough to sneer or pity. A woman stepped out of the corner store and saw her. "Lord, not again," the woman muttered. "You can't stand here with those babies, scaring my customers." "I'm not begging for much," Grace said softly. "Just bread, please." The woman clicked her tongue. "You girls are all the same. No shame. You made your choices. Live with them." She turned and slammed the door shut. Grace's throat tightened. She bent her head against the rain, kissing the top of Nathan's damp hair. "We'll be okay," she lied. Then she heard voices, familiar voices that made her stomach turn. Her foster Aunt Vera and cousin Chloe approached under a large umbrella, strutting like the rain was afraid of them. "There she is," Vera said loudly, pointing straight at Grace. "Pathetic, isn't it? Standing in the rain, like a stray dog." Chloe giggled. "With two brats, no less. What did I tell you, Mama? She'd end up worse than her mother." Grace's knees shook. She lifted her head. "Aunt Vera, please. Just some food for the babies." Vera stopped in front of her, eyes cold. "After the shame you brought on this family? You should be grateful we even let you live in our house all those years. Look at you now, trash just like we said you'd be." Chloe smirked. "And she thought that man of hers would save her. What did he do? Kick her out?" Grace flinched. "Colin, he—" "Don't say his name." Vera cut her off. "No decent man wants you, and no decent woman would beg like this." Grace hugged her twins tighter, heart pounding. "They're hungry. Please." "Not my problem," Vera snapped, yanking Chloe forward. "Come on. Don't waste words on trash." Their perfume lingered as they disappeared into the storm. Grace closed her eyes and felt shame burn hotter than the rain. Memories stabbed her. The Baxter's house where she grew up. Her foster mother Helen slamming plates into the sink. "You missed a spot on the floor," Helen snapped. "Do it again." Grace's hands were raw from scrubbing. "Please, I'm tired." "You'll be tired when you're dead. Work." Roy, her foster father, never looked up from the TV. "She's lucky we even keep her. Otherwise, she'd be on the streets." Grace had believed them. She believed Colin too, when he smiled at her across the church aisle. "I'll take care of you," he promised, pressing her hand. "I'll protect you from them." She clung to those words. But after she told him she was pregnant, everything changed. "You tricked me," Colin shouted, throwing her bag at her. "2 babies? I can't afford this. Can't afford you. Get out." "Colin, it's raining. Get out." The door slammed. That was the night she became nothing again. Now the rain was all she had left. She shifted the twins, trying to cover them with her thin sweater. Her lips trembled. "We'll survive. Mommy will find a way." A sleek black car rolled to a stop beside her. The tinted window lowered. A woman's voice spoke, calm and sharp. "Stop here." The driver pulled over. The door opened, and a tall woman stepped out, holding a wide umbrella. Her presence was like a wall against the storm. Elizabeth Morgan. Her assistant leaned out, frowning. "Ms. Morgan, please, let's not." Elizabeth silenced her with a glance. She walked straight toward Grace. "You'll freeze out here," Elizabeth said gently. "Come with me." Grace backed a step. "I don't want trouble." Elizabeth's eyes softened. "And I don't want to leave a mother and 2 infants in the rain." Grace swallowed, torn. We just need food." Elizabeth crouched, bringing her face level with Grace's. "What are their names?" "Noah," Grace whispered, touching the baby in her left arm. "And Nathan." Elizabeth's lips curved faintly. "Strong names. My name is Elizabeth. Will you come with me?" "Grace." Grace blinked. "How do you know my—" Then she realized. The old name tag still pinned to her. Sweater, Grace. Elizabeth smiled faintly. "Lucky guess." She tilted the umbrella to cover Grace and the twins. "Please, just tonight. Warmth, food, rest." Her assistant rushed over. "Ms. Morgan, shelters exist for this. You don't know who she is." Elizabeth didn't look away from Grace. "I know enough. Get the car ready." Grace's arms ached. The baby stirred, crying weakly. She bit her lip. "What if this is a dream?" "Then it's one worth having," Elizabeth said. "Come." Grace hesitated 1 second longer, then nodded. The driver opened the car door. Grace slid inside, clutching her sons. Elizabeth followed, closing. The umbrella. The leather smelled of cedar and warmth. The assistant sat stiffly, tablet in hand. "This is reckless," she muttered. Elizabeth ignored her. She looked at Grace, at the damp hair clinging to her cheeks, the trembling lips the babies nestled tight. "Why were you out there?" Elizabeth asked softly. Grace's throat closed. "Because there's nowhere else." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "Not anymore. Not tonight." Grace lowered her head, tears mixing with the rain still clinging to her skin. She whispered, "Safe. You said we'd be safe." Elizabeth's voice was steady. "You are." The car pulled into the storm, carrying them toward something none of them could yet name. The black car rolled through iron gates and up a long drive lined with drenched oaks. At the top sat a mansion glowing with warm light. Grace stared, clutching her babies tighter. "I don't belong here," she whispered. Elizabeth touched her arm gently. "You belong where you're safe. That's here." Inside, house staff rushed forward. Towels appeared. A nurse in scrubs hurried in with warm bottles. Grace panicked. "No needles. Please, no hospitals." Elizabeth shook her head. "No needles. Just milk." They guided her into a sitting room with a fireplace. The crackle of flames filled the silence. Grace sat on a sofa while the nurse helped her feed Noah and Nathan. Their cries faded as they drank. Greedily. "They're starving," the nurse murmured. Grace lowered her head. "I gave them everything I could. Sometimes I didn't eat so they could." Elizabeth's jaw tightened. "You did what a mother does. You gave." The assistant hovered in the corner. "Ms. Morgan, we should call social services." "Tomorrow," Elizabeth said firmly. "Tonight she rests." Soup and bread were brought in. Grace ate slowly, then faster, her eyes shining with tears. "I haven't tasted warm bread in months," she whispered. Elizabeth studied her. "Tell me, Grace, who raised you?" Grace froze. Then the words poured out. Helen and Roy Baxter. They said my parents didn't want me. They beat me, made me scrub floors until my hands bled. They told me I was trash. And your husband? Elizabeth asked gently. Grace laughed bitterly. Colin. He promised to love me, but after I got pregnant, he said I trapped him. He threw me out. Elizabeth's eyes softened. I'm sorry. Grace shrugged. Sorry doesn't change anything. No, Elizabeth said. But choices can. The babies finished their bottles and drifted to sleep. Grace held them close, humming softly. The firelight painted her face gold. For the first time in years, she looked almost peaceful. Elizabeth leaned back, watching. Something tugged at her chest, strange and deep. Not charity, not pity, something she couldn't yet name. Later, Grace followed Elizabeth down a quiet hall. We can sleep on the floor, Grace murmured. We don't need much. You'll have the blue room, Elizabeth said. And cribs by morning. Grace stopped, stunned. Why would you do this? Elizabeth met her eyes. Because someone should have. In the blue room, Grace laid the twins on the soft bed. She touched their tiny fingers, counting them, whispering their names. Thank you, she whispered, voice breaking. Elizabeth lingered at the doorway. Rest now. Tomorrow we'll talk more. Grace nodded, laying beside her babies. Within minutes, she was asleep, breathing steady for the first time in months. Elizabeth stood there, unable to leave. She pressed her hand against her chest, startled by the ache. She didn't know why the stranger moved her so deeply, but she knew one thing. A mother with 2 infants had walked out of the rain and into her life, and nothing would ever be the same again. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and how did this story speak to you? Grace woke to sunlight spilling across white curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was soft, the air warm, the babies sleeping in cribs that hadn't existed the night before. Then it came back, Elizabeth's mansion, the storm, the firelight. She sat up quickly, heart racing. Noah? Nathan? The twins stirred, safe and fed. Relief washed over her so heavy she almost cried. A knock came at the door. A maid entered with a tray. Breakfast, ma'am. Not ma'am, Grace whispered. Just Grace. The tray held eggs, fruit, and warm bread. Grace's stomach twisted with hunger, but she hesitated. I can't pay for this. Elizabeth's voice came from the doorway. Then it's a gift. Grace looked up. Elizabeth stood there in a cream suit, her presence filling the room. You don't have to. I know, Elizabeth said gently. But I want to. Grace nodded, embarrassed, then picked up a piece of bread. The warmth made her eyes sting. She ate slowly, trying not to look greedy. Elizabeth stepped closer to the cribs. She bent over Noah and Nathan, smiling faintly. They're beautiful. Grace froze. No one had ever said that. Not Helen, not Roy, not Colin. You think so? She asked, uncertain. I know so, Elizabeth said. She brushed a finger across Nathan's tiny hand. He gripped it, instinctively. Elizabeth's eyes softened in a way Grace had never seen. Something in Grace loosened, just a little. Later, Elizabeth invited her to the garden. Grace followed cautiously, her babies bundled in her arms. The air smelled of roses. A fountain trickled nearby. Elizabeth motioned for her to sit. Tell me about yourself. Grace's guard shot up. What do you want to know? Anything, Elizabeth said. Your favorite food. A childhood memory. Whatever comes to mind. Grace stared at the fountain. Memories aren't good for me. Elizabeth waited, patient. Grace sighed. When I was little, I used to sneak into the woods behind the Baxter's house. It was the only place no one yelled at me. I'd sit there and pretend someone was looking for me, but No one ever came. Elizabeth's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Grace shrugged. It's nothing. It's not nothing, Elizabeth said softly. Grace looked at her, wary. Why do you care? You don't even know me. Elizabeth met her gaze. Because I see something in you I can't ignore. Grace dropped her eyes. Kindness scares me. It never lasts. Elizabeth said nothing, but inside, the words cut deep. That night, after the babies slept, Elizabeth walked past Grace's room. The door was ajar. Inside, Grace sat on the bed, holding something small in her hand. A locket. Elizabeth froze. The lamplight glinted off it, showing faint initials carved into the back. M. Her breath caught. She pushed the door gently. Grace? What's that? Grace looked up, startled. This is just an old locket. I've had it forever. Elizabeth stepped closer, her voice shaking. Where did you get it? Grace shrugged. It was mine as long as I can remember. My foster parents said it was worthless. Trash from the people who dumped me. Elizabeth's heart pounded. Worthless? Trash? Her eyes fixed on the initials. Her hands trembled. For the first time in years, Elizabeth felt a terrifying possibility rising. Elizabeth sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Her eyes never left the locket. May I see it? Grace hesitated, then placed it in her hand. It doesn't open anymore. I tried when I was a kid. Helen slapped me for it. Said I was wasting time on junk. Elizabeth's fingers traced the engraving. The initials stared back at her like ghosts. M. She swallowed hard. Grace. Did you ever wonder where it came from? Grace pulled her knees up, defensive. Sometimes. But whenever I asked, they told me the same thing. It came from nobodies. People who didn't want me. So I stopped asking. Elizabeth looked at her. You were never a nobody. Grace laughed bitterly. That's easy for you to say. Look at this place. Look at me. Elizabeth closed the locket and handed it back. I think you've been lied to. Grace froze. What do you mean? Elizabeth almost spoke the truth right then, but fear stopped her. Instead she said, objects carry stories even when people try to erase them. That locket has a story. Maybe it's time we found it. Grace's eyes searched hers. Why do you care so much? Elizabeth forced a steady voice. Because I can't stand seeing you believe you're worthless. Grace looked down at the twins sleeping soundly. If it weren't for them, I don't think I'd still be here. Elizabeth touched her arm. Then they saved you. And maybe they'll save more than you realize. Silence stretched. Grace finally whispered, do you think it means something? The locket. Elizabeth nodded faintly. Yes, more than you know. She rose quickly, masking her shaking hands. Rest now. We'll talk tomorrow. When Elizabeth stepped into the hall, Paula was waiting. You've been in there a long time, the assistant said cautiously. Is everything all right? Elizabeth forced a calm expression. She has a locket, old, with initials. Paula frowned. And? Elizabeth's eyes darkened. The initials are mine. Paula blinked. You mean? Elizabeth cut her off. Don't speak it. Not yet. I need answers first. That night, Elizabeth lay awake in her own bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories flooded back. The hospital. Her father's stern face. The nurse whispering stillborn. The ache that never left her. But what if it had been a lie? The possibility terrified her. And yet, the moment she saw the locket, something inside her shifted. Morning came. Elizabeth rose early and called a number she hadn't used in years. Detective Heiress, a voice answered. This is Elizabeth Morgan, she said firmly. I need you to find out everything about a woman named Grace Baxter, and I need you to dig into the past 20 years ago at St. Mary's Hospital. A birth, a death, or maybe not a death at all. The line went silent. Then Heiress said, Understood. Elizabeth hung up and stared out the window. In the garden, Grace walked slowly with her babies, her hair glowing in the morning sun. She looked fragile, yet stronger than anyone gave her credit for. Elizabeth whispered to herself, "If it's true, if she's mine, then they stole her from me." Her hand clenched against the glass. For the first time in decades, Elizabeth Morgan felt both hope and rage burning together. And she knew one thing: the locket was no worthless trinket. It was the key to a story too heavy for anyone to hide. The rain had stopped days ago, but Elizabeth Morgan still felt the storm inside her. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the locket. Those two letters carved into her soul. She couldn't wait. At dawn, she called Detective Heiress again. "I need answers," she said into the phone. "All of them. Grace Baxter, her foster parents, her husband, her past. And 20 years ago, St. Mary's Hospital, the night my child was declared stillborn. Find out what really happened." Harris's tone was steady. "I'll dig. But if what you suspect is true, Ms. Morgan, this could be ugly." Elizabeth's hand tightened on the receiver. Truth is always ugly when it's buried in lies. Days stretched like wire. Grace adjusted slowly to the mansion. She helped the maids with small chores, though they told her not to. She spent hours in the garden with the twins, humming songs Elizabeth had never heard. But the whispers began. Elizabeth's cousin Margaret showed up unannounced one afternoon. Her perfume thick, her smile sharper than glass. "Well," Margaret said, glancing at Grace holding Nathan on her hip. "What's this stray doing here?" Elizabeth's voice went cool. "This is Grace. She's my guest." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Guest? Don't tell me you've brought a beggar into the house." "People will talk. Let them." Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You don't know her. She could be using you. Or, worse, scheming for your money." Elizabeth's eyes cut like steel. "Leave, Margaret. Now." Margaret smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." As she left, Grace whispered, "I shouldn't be here. I'll only cause trouble." Elizabeth turned sharply. "Don't believe a word she says. You belong here." But inside, Elizabeth's chest twisted. If Margaret and the others already suspected, what would happen when the truth came out? 3 nights later, Detective Heiress returned. He carried a thick folder. Elizabeth dismissed Paula and sat alone with him in her study. The firelight flickered across Harris's tired face. "What did you find?" Elizabeth asked. He opened the folder. "Everything you feared. And worse." Elizabeth braced herself. "Grace's birth certificate was falsified," Heiress began. "The hospital records show an infant born to Elizabeth Morgan on May 17, 20 years ago. The child was listed as stillborn. But cross-checking with nursing logs, I found discrepancies. One nurse noted the baby cried. That note was crossed out later." Elizabeth's breath hitched. "She lived." "Yes," Heiress said grimly. "She was taken by orders of your stepfather. He wanted control of your inheritance. With no child, your line would end. The estate would eventually fall to his chosen heirs, your cousins." Elizabeth's stomach twisted. "My stepfather? The man who swore to protect me?" Heiress nodded. "He paid the Baxters to raise her, or rather, to keep her down. They were compensated handsomely to make sure Grace never thrived. Never questioned her origins." Elizabeth's chest heaved. "That explains the cruelty. They weren't guardians, they were jailers." Heiress slid another paper forward. "DNA results. The locket was tested. Trace biological material. Inside matched Grace's. Cross-checked against your own. It's undeniable. Grace is your daughter." Elizabeth's eyes blurred with tears. She covered her mouth with her hand, a sob breaking free. "All these years. All the nights I wept for a child I thought dead. She was alive. Suffering." Heiress lowered his voice. "I'm sorry. It was greed. Pure and simple." Elizabeth shook her head, tears sliding freely now. "Greed from my own bloodline. Or worse, from the man who pretended to be part of it." She thought of Grace's haunted eyes, the bruises hidden in her voice, the way she jumped at kindness. All of it because of him, because of lies spun the night she gave birth. Elizabeth pressed her face into her hands and wept. When Elizabeth finally told Paula, her assistant's face went pale. Grace is your daughter? Elizabeth nodded, voice hoarse. They stole her from me, lied that she was dead, and they paid monsters to raise her like an animal. Paula staggered back. That means your stepfather knew. The trustees knew. They were in on it. Yes, Elizabeth whispered. That's why they panic whenever Grace is near me. They've kept this buried for 20 years. Paula's mouth tightened. They'll fight you. Hard. Elizabeth's eyes flashed. Let them. I won't let Grace suffer another day because of them. But the war began quickly. Margaret returned with Daniel, her son. They cornered Elizabeth in the drawing room while Grace was upstairs. You're making a mistake, Margaret hissed. That girl is dangerous. She'll ruin you. Daniel smirked. She's probably pretending those babies are yours, too. Do you really think she just stumbled into your life? It's a con. Elizabeth's face hardened. Enough. Open your eyes, Margaret snapped. She wants your money. She'll bleed you dry. Elizabeth rose, her voice like thunder. She is my blood, my daughter, and I will not let you speak against her again. Their faces drained of color. You can't prove that, Daniel stammered. Elizabeth pulled a folder from the desk and slammed it down. Hospital records, payment transfers, from my stepfather to the Baxters. DNA confirmation. I have more proof than you'll ever want. Margaret's lips trembled. If this gets out, it will get out. Elizabeth cut her off. And when it does, your lies will be ash. They left quickly, whispering to each other, panic clear in their eyes. Upstairs, Grace rocked Nathan gently. She heard faint echoes of voices, tension lacing the air. When Elizabeth entered the nursery, Grace looked up nervously. Are they angry I'm here? Grace asked. Elizabeth sat beside her, brushing a hand over Noah's tiny head. They're angry at the truth, but truth doesn't care if it makes people angry. Grace frowned. Truth? What truth? Elizabeth's throat ached. She wanted to tell her everything, to shout it, to fall at her feet and beg forgiveness for 20 years of stolen life. But not yet. Not like this. Soon, Elizabeth whispered. I promise. Grace studied her with wide eyes. Then, softly, I believe you. That night, when the house was quiet, Elizabeth stood by the window of her study, the city lights glowing below. Detective Harris's words echoed in her mind. Your stepfather ordered it. They wanted control of the inheritance. Her hands shook as she poured herself a glass of wine. She remembered holding her newborn, weak but alive, hearing that first cry. She remembered begging the nurse, let me see her, and her stepfather's stern face, saying, she's gone. Don't torture yourself. It had all been a lie. Tears blurred her vision again. She whispered into the empty room, I'm sorry, Grace. I should have fought harder. I should have known. Her chest ached with both fury and relief. Fury at the family who betrayed her. Relief that the daughter she mourned was still alive, still breathing under her roof. She pressed a hand to the window. Below, she saw Grace crossing the garden with her twins, pausing to look at the roses. Elizabeth whispered, You are mine, and I will make this right. For the first time in 2 decades, the grief inside her shifted. Not gone, but turning into resolve. The ballroom glittered like a palace. Chandeliers threw golden light across polished marble. Violins played softly, and the city's wealthiest crowded the floor in gowns and tuxedos. Waiters moved, like shadows, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was the annual Morgan Foundation Gala, the crown jewel of society events. Tonight, Elizabeth Morgan would host not just as a philanthropist, but as a woman carrying a secret too heavy to keep any longer. At her side walked Grace, dressed in a simple but elegant gown Elizabeth had chosen. Noah and Nathan, bundled in soft blankets, were carried by two trusted nannies who stayed close. Grace's hands trembled. She whispered, "I shouldn't be here. Everyone's staring." Elizabeth touched her arm. "Let them stare. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Grace's eyes darted nervously. "They'll laugh. I know people like this." Elizabeth's voice steadied. "So do I. And tonight, they'll learn the truth." The whispers started almost instantly. "Who is she? That girl with the babies? Elizabeth must be out of her mind. Bringing someone like that here." Margaret swept across the room like a storm cloud, Daniel trailing behind her. Her gown shimmered, but her eyes were sharp and cruel. She stopped in front of Elizabeth and Grace, her voice carrying farther than it needed to. "Elizabeth, dear, what on earth is this?" She waved at Grace like she was pointing at a stray animal. "Surely this isn't your idea of charity?" Grace lowered her head, heat burning her cheeks. Elizabeth's tone was calm. "This is Grace, my guest." Margaret laughed, loud and brittle. "Guest? My God, Liz, she looks like she crawled out of the gutter. And with twins? Who even knows where they came from?" Daniel smirked. "Careful, cousin. People will start to think you've lost your judgment. Associating with strays has a way of ruining reputations." The room chuckled uncomfortably. Cameras flashed, hungry for scandal. Grace clutched her gown, whispering, "I should leave. Please." Elizabeth caught her wrist firmly. "No, you'll stay." Margaret's smile sharpened. She raised her voice so the crowd could hear. "She's nothing but a stray with babies. You've lost your mind, Elizabeth. Do you even know who she is?" That was the moment. Elizabeth knew it. She had prepared for weeks, carried the truth like a sword, waiting to be drawn. Now was the time. She released Grace's hand, stepped forward, and took the microphone from the master of ceremonies. The room stilled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elizabeth said, her voice echoing through the grand hall. "I wasn't planning to make a speech tonight, but some truths can no longer stay silent." Margaret's smile faltered. Daniel shifted nervously. Elizabeth scanned the crowd, then turned her gaze on Grace. "This young woman, this so-called stray, is not what she seems. Her name is Grace, and she is not my guest. She is my daughter." Gasps rippled through the hall. Cameras exploded with flashes. Whispers rose like waves crashing against the walls. Elizabeth continued, her voice steady. 20 years ago, I was told my child had died at birth. Mourned her every day since. But it was a lie. A lie orchestrated by my stepfather and carried out by those who wanted to steal what was rightfully hers. They wanted me childless so they could control the Morgan fortune. Margaret's face drained of color. "Lies!" she shouted, her voice shrill. "You can't prove." Elizabeth raised a hand, silencing her. "I can." Detective Heiress uncovered falsified hospital records, payment transfers to the Baxters, her so-called foster parents, and DNA tests confirm what I already knew in my heart. Grace is my blood, my heir, my daughter. She turned toward Grace, her eyes glistening. The locket she carried all these years, dismissed as worthless trash, was the only piece of me they couldn't steal. The initials engraved, mine. Gasps echoed again. Reporters scribbled furiously, recording every word. Grace stood frozen, her mouth open, tears trembling on her lashes. "Your daughter," she whispered. Elizabeth crossed the stage and took her hands. "Yes, Grace, my daughter, the one they stole from me, the one I thought I lost forever." Grace shook her head, overwhelmed. No, they told me I was nothing. They told me my mother threw me away." Elizabeth pulled her close, tears slipping down her cheeks. "They lied. You were never unwanted. You were stolen. And from this day forward, you will never suffer again." The hall erupted, not with laughter, but with outrage directed at Margaret and Daniel. Allies turned away, their faces full of disgust. A board member shouted, "So it was you all along? You let a child suffer for greed." Cameras swung toward Margaret. She flailed, shouting, "This is slander. She's inventing this for sympathy." But no one listened. Daniel tried to step forward, but security intercepted him. Reporters swarmed, questions flying like arrows. Elizabeth wrapped her arm around Grace and guided her to the microphone again. "For years, I believed cruelty had stolen everything from me. But cruelty cannot erase blood, cannot bury truth forever. Tonight, the truth stands before you." She lifted Grace's hand high. "This is my daughter, Grace Morgan. And these," she touched Noah and Nathan's tiny heads as the nannies stepped closer. "These are my grandsons, the family my stepfather tried to erase. But blood cannot be erased. It always finds its way home." The crowd erupted into applause. Some stood. Others wept openly. Margaret screamed from the back, "You'll regret this, Elizabeth." Elizabeth turned, her eyes cold as steel. "No, Margaret, you'll regret it. You and everyone who conspired to steal my child. Your influence is gone. Your names will be remembered only for betrayal." Security ushered Margaret and Daniel out as reporters followed like a storm. Grace stood trembling, staring at Elizabeth. You really want me? After everything? After all the shame?" Elizabeth cupped her face, her voice breaking. "I wanted you every day of your life, and I will spend the rest of mine making sure you know it." Grace's sob broke free. She collapsed into her mother's arms, clinging to her as if she'd never let go. The twins stirred, sensing the emotion around them, but settled again in the warmth of the embrace. Elizabeth kissed Grace's hair, whispering loud enough for the hall to hear, "This is my daughter, the one you tried to erase. And from this day forward, she will never suffer again." The applause thundered. The violins swelled. The cameras flashed brighter than stars. Grace, once mocked in the rain, now stood restored. Not by revenge, but by truth and dignity. Elizabeth held the twins, rocking them gently, her voice carrying one final message. Cruelty and greed may bury truth for years, but love and justice will always unearth it in the end. The hall rose to its feet, applause echoing like a promise. And for the first time, Elizabeth Morgan's family was whole again.